burnout is when a business owner gets to the point where their desire to keep going is killed. Those people who say burnout doesn't exist, they haven't looked at the science. It's just not how we're built. Like our brain is one of the most important organs in our body. If we aren't providing it with the proper breaks, it will get burnt out. I think also when I think about gym owners, the ones who stopped, like closed their doors, a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were just working way too many hours with not enough results for them to justify going through that sacrifice. The idea of Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., the 40-hour work week is pretty much ingrained. Little do we realize how that 40-day habit came about. Like a lot of what they're doing to grow their business is outside of the class itself or the session that they're training.
It's like knowledge work, right? Basically.
It's knowledge work. Exactly.
Right.
There's a lot of science now over the last 100 years that show us knowledge work mentally fatigues your brain more than physical labor work. The most efficient workday is
Welcome to another episode brought to you by Imagine Strength, the future of safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. Are you a HIIT studio owner looking for equipment that's not just top-notch, but also tailored to your specific needs? Imagine Strength is your answer. Inspired by the legendary Arthur Jones, Imagine Strength is revolutionizing the HIIT industry with their state-of-the-art yet affordable equipment. Their team doesn't just sell HIIT equipment, they live and breathe it. I've personally experienced their gear at the Resistance Exercise Conference, and let me tell you, it was an intense workout that I won't soon forget, in the best way possible, of course. So why choose Imagine Strength? Number one, they provide customized solutions for HIIT studios. Number two, they have budget-friendly yet high-performance designs. And number three, they're committed to innovation and excellence in high-intensity training specifically. Founder Jeff Turner and his dedicated team are on a mission to make HIIT accessible to everyone. Getting started is easy. Number one, visit imaginestrength.com. Number two, consult with their expert team. And number three, choose the equipment that will skyrocket your business. Don't wait. Head over to imaginestrength.com and elevate your HIIT studio today with Imagine Strength. Lawrence Snell here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, your one-stop shop for elevating your HIIT business and fueling your passion for high-intensity training. This is episode 452, and my guest today is a returning guest, a popular one, John Briggs. John is not just known for his expressive t-shirts, but his strong stance that business owners should keep more of their money to build long-term wealth. I'm sure that resonates with many of us. As a founder of Insight Tax, and many of you would have listened to previous podcasts with John and certainly inquired about Insight Tax following those episodes. And he's the author of another book, Profit First for Micro Gyms, that will be familiar to many of you as well. He has built an amazing team of non-traditional accountants to help combat the IRS bullying and change the accounting industry from within. Through his 12 plus years of entrepreneurship, he has learned that achieving a highly profitable business can be overwhelming, particularly with all the barriers and unknowns that new owners are forced to deal with. Entrepreneurs can quickly become stressed and often sadly give up on the mission that they set out for because of burnout. Really excited to talk about that, actually. In much the same way that the body needs blood to survive, our economy needs small businesses, the lifeblood of the economy, to stay healthy and to grow more resilient. To this end, John is a man on a mission to give entrepreneurs a new workday standard so they avoid burnout and stay in business. It helps them be more productive by actually working less so they have a happy and fulfilled life, both in and out of their business. And he talks the walk, battling against traditional CPA culture of overwork, underpaid, pay your dues and suffer while you're at it mentality, by providing his team a healthy work-life balance, even during busy tax seasons. John, welcome back to the podcast. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lawrence.
You're very welcome. You always deliver great value, so I'm excited to talk to you today. And I will just say, I haven't many questions here that are about finance, and that's deliberate because we've already recorded quite a bit of content in the past on cash flow and financial management, specifically for small gyms or small fitness businesses. So what we'll do is we'll link up in the show notes on episode 452, the podcast for that. Obviously, if we touch on finance, that's okay. But
yep.
None of my questions are not quite focused on that. So you got a new book, which is very exciting. Very much this type of stuff always really resonates with me. I'm obsessed with productivity and time management and all things like that. So it's called the 3.3 Rule. So let's start with what inspired you to write this book?
So I actually am really fed up with the accounting industry. Man, Obviously your audience might not be as familiar with it as I am. They might have just experienced CPAs who likely ignored them or didn't provide a super great service. Maybe they seem a little crotchety. Um, but on our end, what happens is you have the big four, which these are billion-dollar accounting firms, and they do multiple services. That's why they're billion-dollar firms. And then all the little guys just say, "Oh, I'm just going to do what the bigger guys do because it seems to be working for them." And what that looks like is I'm going to hire somebody, and then I'm going to work them for 70 to 80 hours a week for as long as these poor suckers are going to deal with this mistreatment, knowing that at some point headhunters call those people, they leave and they go somewhere else. So for the short amount of time I have them with me, I'm just going to squeeze every last ounce of soul out of them. And that's effectively how the accounting industry works. We've created something here with our firm where we don't do that. We actually want our team members to have life outside. From a profitability standpoint, as a business and a small business owner, it's actually terrible for me to try to do that mindset of just squeeze energy out of people, because now I have to deal with constant rotation of team members. And whether I'm training, for your audience, like training a new coach, like that's an investment of your time as an owner.
Mhm.
And so I don't want to do that all the time. So that's what was going on.
So essentially coaches get churned out of the business because they get burnt out, basically.
Mhm.
Do you think burnout's an interesting word though? Because it seems sometimes I find it to be quite abstract. You've got some people out there online kind of saying there's no such thing as burnout. You just have to get better at working longer and harder and smarter. And then also it can be quite difficult to identify what is burnout. Like, what does that mean? Maybe you could elaborate on that for me.
Totally. Burnout. Yeah, I agree with you. It actually is a pretty elusive
Mhm.
phrase. And I think it means something a little bit different to everybody. In my mind, I consider burnout the event or period of time that results in the killing of your desire to do something. In this case, we're talking about keeping your business open. So to me, burnout is when a business owner gets to the point where their desire to keep going is killed. Now, that being said, those people who say burnout doesn't exist, they haven't looked at the science. It's just not how we're built. Like, you just need to learn how to go harder, go longer. Okay, so, I guess you have a small group of marathon runners, for example, that want to do ultra marathons. And so now they're going to run 200 miles in 2 days or something crazy. You have a small group of people like that. But I'm willing to bet if you looked at, like, if people were wired up to machines while they were doing this, that's not actually very good for your body to do. And the same thing happens mentally. Like, our brain is one of the most important organs in our body. And if we aren't providing it with the proper breaks, it will get burnt out. And frankly, burnout can look very differently from a mental standpoint than it does look physically. And some people go down really dark paths when they mentally get burnt out. And so there's too much evidence out there to say that there's not.
Mhm. Yeah, I really like your definition about killing desire to work on your business. I think that's actually a really nice, concise definition. I think a lot of people can really relate to. So we went on a little digression there, but do you want to get back to what inspired you? So obviously really tired of the industry, found another way, a better way to build a profitable business and retain great people, it sounds like.
Yeah. And
more to say on
so,
that? Yeah.
yeah, in the accounting industry, most firms during tax season, which is really January 15th to April 15th, they expect you to work at least 55 billable hours a week, which usually is 65. So that's the minimum. And if you want to keep your job, you have to work at least 65 hours a week. Our firm has averaged 42 hours a week the last 2 tax season, almost 3. And so I have enough data to support that this works. And by the way, we're still profitable. We're still around. Our clients still like us. While we're not perfect, we're still, overall, people like us. And so I initially wanted to just write a manifesto. And I hate using that word. I wish I could come up with a different word, but that's what the author community calls it. Because I think sometimes manifesto is tied to some crazy people. But
Yeah, it is.
it was really just like, I just wanted to say, like, I wanted to get on a soapbox and tell the accounting industry, stop it. Enough is enough already. You guys are billion-dollar companies. Your net income is in the, like, you have enough money. None of you are suffering. Why are you making 50%, 70% of your workforce suffer when you're fine? I'm all about capitalism, but I think there is a line of, treating people with inhumane ways. And so I initially started as a manifesto. And then as I started talking to author communities and other people, they're like, oh, well, I'm an ex-lawyer and that's the exact same thing that we suffered through. Or I'm an engineer and that's the same thing I suffered through. I think also when I think about gym owners, the ones who stopped, like closed their doors, a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were just working way too many hours with not enough results for them to justify going through that sacrifice. And I realized this maybe then needs to be something more than just a quick 3-page like soapbox rant to the accounting industry. And it evolved from there and became a 300-ish page book.
Very good. Congratulations. And let's dive into some of the insights, right? So I haven't read the book. It's not, is it available to buy now? To actually, is it pre-order?
It can be pre-order. Yep.
Pre-order. Okay. Well, we'll obviously link it up in the show notes, and we'll say the link now, just in case people don't get to the end of this today. So, what's the link, the URL for the book?
If you go 33rulebook.com.
Okay. Yeah. 33rulebook.com. Excellent. So that's free, the number 3, by the way, free. Okay. So let's dive into some of the concepts in the book. So, why don't I ask you, which ones do you think are going to resonate most with my audience?
Yeah, I think let's start with defining what the 3.3 rule is.
Sounds good.
So in the US, most people, I'm assuming across the world internationally, the idea of Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., the 40-hour work week is pretty much ingrained in everybody, right?
Sure.
Little do we realize how that 40-day habit came about. So back in the early 1900s, working 100 hours a week was normal. The whole job, the idea was like, we're talking industrial age. We just got to keep these machines going. Well, in order to keep the machines going, we need humans to maintain them and keep them going at all times. And because we didn't have the knowledge we have now, people accepted it. Okay, 800 hours. They didn't like it, but well, I guess why are we living? To make these machines keep going. Then, early 1920s, Henry Ford comes around and he sells cars. You know who doesn't want to buy cars? Everyone who's working 100 hours a week, who only has like 2 hours to themselves. They literally have no need to buy cars. Well, he was pretty villainized at the time, but he said, you know what? I'm going to give people 2 days off, and I'm going to shorten their work days on the other days they're working to only 8 hours.
Hang on, are you saying that he instigated the weekend?
I am.
Oh, I did not know that. Henry Ford, really?
Henry Ford, yeah.
Okay.
And now what you have are people who have 2 extra days. Well, gosh, 2 extra days. And I'm not totally like exhausted because I only worked 8 hours up to that point. Let's go somewhere. Well, if I need to go somewhere, what do I need? One of these really cool, fancy motorized carriages that Henry Ford is selling. So in an effort to sell more cars, we got the 40-hour work week. And look, it was better than what they had for sure, but not based on anything other than arguably someone who wants to just sell more of their product. Like genius. It really was genius.
But unknowingly did give some respite to employees as well.
Totally. Yeah. And then it took 30-ish years for it to become really official. The government ended up passing some laws to create overtime hours and things like that. But that was kind of the catalyst. Well, 100 years have passed by, and the way that we all work is now very different, even for fitness studio owners. Like a lot of what they do that they're doing to grow their business is outside of the class itself or the session that they're training.
It's like knowledge work, right? Basically.
It's knowledge work. Exactly.
Right.
We have a lot of knowledge workers, and there's a lot of science now
Mhm.
over the last 100 years that show us like what this type of work does to our body and to our mind. And there are some studies that show mental, like knowledge work mentally fatigues your brain more than physical labor work. Obviously physical labor and you get physically fatigued, but it takes more energy to keep your mind sharp with the knowledge work stuff. So that's kind of the setting of it.
Mhm.
And with all the studies, and we can get into them, I'll hit to the punchline, and then we can talk studies if you want of how I came up with this. But the most efficient workday is working up to 3 hours at a time, followed by a 30% recovery period. That's basically the 3.3 rule.
Mhm. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think might want to leave some of the studies out unless you give really high level summaries because of the limited time we have together. Um, but I do want to dig into this anyway. So, okay, repeat what you just said there, and then give us a couple of examples how that might look in
Yep.
a accountancy practice, how that might look like in a small gym.
So the most effective workday is to work up to 3 hours at a time, followed by a 30% recovery period. So for an
30%. What does that
example,
mean? Yeah.
yeah. So for example, let's say I did an hour of work, of focus time. Like I'm working, I'm focused, I did an hour. A 30% recovery time is 30% of how long I worked. So in
Oh,
this
I see.
case, I would take a 20-minute break. If I worked 2 hours at a time, I'd take an hour, like a 40-minute break. If I worked the full 3 hours, which is what the science shows is really the longest your brain is going to be able to hold like peak performance, then you would take an hour break after that. So it has to be a little bit flexible. You've probably heard of the Pomodoro rule. Have you heard
Yeah,
of
sure.
that?
Familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
20. Yeah, go ahead.
Pomodoro is tomato in Italian, because it's literally based on the guy who created it, used a tomato kitchen timer. And when he started off, he's just like, can I focus for 2 minutes at a time? And he eventually worked up and found the optimal time was like 20 minutes. But if you look at the whole Pomodoro rule, it's like, it's the same concept. It's just a little bit too rigid because
Yeah.
you could be in the zone. And if that timer goes off after 20 minutes, you've now lost your zone of focus where it's like, I could have worked for another hour and been fine. But the recovery period is really what's critical. So during the recovery period, you just do anything that wasn't work related. So it's not, if I'm training someone, a break isn't going and reading my email.
Mhm.
A break is something that allows your brain to completely decompress. A lot of the activities are creative related, like journaling, drawing, walking, just going for a walk. Honestly, my favorite of the recovery period is just taking a nap,
Okay.
just laying down on my floor and taking a quick nap. It's great.
What
Totally
about
appropriate.
like working out, exercise as well?
Um, yes, for most people, I would caution studio owners that maybe I would try to find other recovery periods and not just default to exercising because that's what they're also doing with their
I see.
members.
I see. Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah,
Interesting.
for someone like us, who just sit at a desk all day, um,
Yeah.
uh, for sure, going and exercising is totally valid. Now, I'm not saying it's not valid for a studio owner. They would just need to separate that they're truly getting in their own zone and not worrying about like, oh, yeah, I did that this way, and I would probably teach Bob, who's struggling with the same thing, to do it this way too. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's interesting because I've heard about some studies on this stuff, and I thought that 4 hours was like the top end when they've done. Is it the study I'm aware of? It's the ones that like Cal Newport often talks about. I think it's to do with musicians, and I could be getting this completely wrong. I've not read the original material, but I thought it was 4 hours. I mean, I'm assuming you've dived into this, reviewed quite a lot of the
yeah.
material. So have you heard that it's 4 hours? What led you to 3 hours being like the top end?
I've read his book. I've read Cal's book, Deep Work, and I actually
Yeah.
feel like the 3.3 rule picks up where his left off.
Okay.
I don't remember 4 hours, and maybe he did reference it. It didn't come up in all the studies that I found. But here's the difference between Cal's book and his emphasis, which and where I'm trying to go. Mine my concepts apply more to everybody. See, deep work, the way Cal talks about it's a great concept. Remove all these distractions and just focus on something and commit to focusing on something for a long period of time. He doesn't, like, I don't remember him actually specifying like how long, but his background and his audience that he's writing to are programmers and people who have jobs that aren't interrupted. But like, we have receptionists and your studio owners have clients who are calling in. Anyone who has any sort of customer facing thing, you can't consistently take a deep work schedule or you're providing a bad service to your clients. And so this allows you, so he calls it shallow frenetic work. Right. He's like, we need to avoid shallow frenetic work. And I'm saying you actually can't avoid that. That there is just an element of being a studio owner that you're going to have some of that exists. And you need to be able to be interrupted. So you're just not going to be able to deep work. Now, that's not to say all the time, but for sure, it's not something where now I have to feel bad that all the work that I do is in deep work and now I'm a terrible person. It's about building in like a 3.3 rule where it's like, okay, at this time of the day, I know I'm getting a lot of calls. So I'm going to do the shallow frenetic work that's necessary and not try to do something that's deep work related, as long as, again, I give myself a 30% recovery period.
Okay. So do you want to just elaborate on from there? So it's 3 hours, it's a 30%, or just as one example, it's a 30% recovery period. What happens next? Are you saying you do that again? How does that play out for a whole day? And stop me if I'm going too far ahead. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. That's exactly right.
Okay.
So I would say there's 3 main approaches to the 3.3 rule. Like, so you could be a sprinter. That's what we call it. Someone who, like, look, I know that I get distracted easily. So after about an hour, I'm going to need a little bit of a break. So in fact, Mike McCallum, who wrote Profit First, and he just has a new book came out called All In. It's about hiring systems. He and I are good friends. And he, for example, when he's in his writing months, he's like, I can write for about 50 minutes and then I need about a 20-minute break. He's like, that's kind of been yeah. So he's more of a sprinter. For me, when I wrote the book, an hour and a half was about a good length of time for me. I could.
Can that also be quite variable? Like, you could be in flow and you could be just riffing on a topic that's easy and you could go for like 2 to 3 hours. And then there's other bits where you almost get like writer's block, or it's really challenging and you can go for like half an hour and you need a break.
Exactly. And that's why the rule's the rule. So it's flexible. It's not like rigid and that's for people that to get to that state. That's the ideal state, is where you're working and you realize I just need a break right now. Then that should give you permission. Like, okay, how long was I working? What's 30% of that? I'm going to take that break right now.
So hang on. Did you just, sorry to keep butting in, John. It's just so many questions on this. So, are you really looking for intuition to tell you? Because it's quite clear, at least for me, I know when I need to take a break, you know?
Yeah. I think that's the ideal aspirational. Can we get there intuitionally with our intuition? I don't have that great of intuition. So I'm more of a like rule follower. Like, what's the rule? So like, I have blocks on my schedule. I set out the appointments ahead of time. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to need a break after that. Or it's like, you have 3 hours scheduled in a row. You need to take a break after that. Yeah, I think people are going to vary, but ideally, if you can get to the intuition part, that's awesome. Yeah.
Okay. So what's next? So I butted in. You were talking about.
So sprinter is the like hour at a time. If you're a jogger, maybe you're an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then we call it the Zen master. You can go the full 3 hours. I have some people when I train the concepts, like, I promise I can go longer than 3 hours. And I'm like, I promise the science says that anything after 3 hours, while you might be mentally focused there, your effectiveness at what you're doing has declined. So I mean, there are some studies that showed some people after 20 minutes, dropped in effectiveness at what they were doing.
But that is a learned skill, right? You can get way better at single tasking. And we all know people suck today at this, right? Because people are just really distracted, really just bombarded by email. they're so used to short attention spans, looking at reels and shorts on social, being constantly distracted, never actually just letting themselves become bored. You can tell I'm a massive Cal Newport Deep Questions fan because I just find this stuff fascinating, incredibly useful. And I think that, yeah, it's like I say to a lot of people, I say, if you can start getting better at focusing on something for like 1 to 2 hours, that's like a superpower today. Like you're actually ahead of like 99.9% of people if you can do that. I used to be able to do like 3 hours, like 3 hours in one go. I used to be your Zen master, right? And I noticed in myself that I actually got worse. And I'm sort of trying to work back up to that, but I'm probably a 2-hour guy now as my peak, you know?
Yeah. And for me, it really does depend on the task I'm doing. Like if you get me in front of an Excel file and I'm doing forecasting for either my business or a client, like I love that stuff. Playing with numbers and formulas, and like I could do that for 3 hours, no problem. But again, the writing stuff, after about an hour and a half, like without fail, I don't consider myself an author. It's just stuff that I felt I needed to get out because it's a accumulation of all the things I've learned as a business owner. And I just knew, I'm like, okay, yeah, my writing sucks right now. I need to take it.
So I'm going to keep derailing you, but in terms of this, okay, it's this 30% recovery. So this is something I've not actually come across before. So that's supported by the science. There's science to show that actually is it, like, where does that come from? Because that sounds interesting to me that you need 30% of the work time to be used for recovery. So that is supported by, there's evidence to support that, is there?
Yeah.
Right.
So there's one out of the University of Illinois Champaign. The guy wanted to do a study, and he started with the idea of attention span. It was the biggest rave when he started doing the study. And it's like, how do you exercise your attention span and how do you keep it? How do you not lose it? And he said, I don't think you lose your attention span. Actually, if you realize your attention is always on something. So it's not a span of attention. It's just a matter of maybe you're not focused on the right thing that you wanted to be focused on. So with that premise, he then started looking at other studies that looked at physical stimulus. Like, for example, the clothes that we're wearing, like the shirts, for example, we put it on because it's a constant stimulus. Our brain neutralizes the fact that we're wearing a shirt. But now, as we're talking about it, I'm sure some of us listening are like, actually, okay, I can feel the fabric on my skin now that I wasn't feeling prior because our brain neutralized it. He said, I wonder if the same thing happens with our mental focus. And so he did studies and showed that basically, I won't go into like the 4 study, like there was 4 groups and blah, blah, blah. But the end result was the group that was interrupted from the task performed better. And then that interruption that he talked about was a way to say like they took mental break from what they were doing, and it reset their focus when they came back to what they were doing.
Yeah. And I'm assuming the studies are elaborated on in the actual book. So
yeah,
that's probably, yeah, cool. So buy the book and then you can read the studies, guys. Okay. So what happens then? Let's say I do, someone's going to be selfish about this. Although this will obviously apply to the audience too. You do 2 hours, whatever is your level of focused work. And then you take your 30% recovery break. Then what do you recommend after that?
So then you go back to work and you're going to be more productive, right? Like when I owned a gym, I owned a CrossFit studio. I know that might be a bad word for some of your studios.
Well, at least you're aware of that.
Yeah.
At least you're, see, they're pleased that you said that, John.
I didn't know any better. Sorry, but
no. I don't want to sound that like dogmatic.
So I owned it for about 3 years, and we noticed that some trainers could go 3 hours, but if they had a 4th class in a row, it was so stupid. And we had others, it's like their 3rd class in a row really sucked. So we kind of had evidence that their attention to their members and providing the proper instruction really started declining the longer they were working. And so I think an application for your listeners are they need to recognize where that is for themselves, or if they have coaches that work for them. Mm-hmm. Each person might be a little bit different. but make sure they have a time in between those sessions so they can really get a full reset. And so when we had coaches on and they're in the gym and it wasn't actual class starting time yet, the members would ask them questions, right? So they still had to be on. So be aware of that as well. When we're talking about a recovery period, them needing to answer questions and interact and like that type of stuff with the members would not be considered a recovery time period. That would be considered work, even if it's not during a class time. So give them flexibility to maybe have some alone time as a proper break.
Today's episode is sponsored by Imagine Strength, the game changer in safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training machines. When it comes to HIIT, Imagine Strength is your go-to for intelligently designed, efficient, and affordable equipment. Their team is passionate about HIIT, and it shows in every piece they craft. So why are Imagine Strength the right choice? Number one, they tailor-make their equipment for HIIT studios. Number two, they provide cost-effective solutions for your business. And number three, they are committed to ongoing innovation and refinement. Ready to take your HIIT business to the next level? Visit imaginestrength.com to discuss your needs and find the perfect gear for your studio. Join the HIIT revolution of Imagine Strength and transform your workout experience today. And I appreciate you tailoring this. It's really helpful. So what about, like, I'm just thinking of a staff member, a trainer, does a bunch of sessions, bunch of classes, and for their recovery, they go for lunch and they sit there on their phone. Is that really recovery?
Going for lunch for sure. Depending on what they're doing on their phone, absolutely not.
Why do you say
for
that?
example, because playing games that push dopamine into our bodies, like the Candy Crush games or all those phone apps, right? Like that is not giving your brain the right break. You're still stimulating it in a similar way to the way work does it. So I wouldn't do that. But watching comedians is a valid, like that's a valid recovery period. So if they're watching YouTube videos of comedians, that would be fine. Because also comedian bits are a little bit longer than the 7 seconds. Like being on TikTok, no, there's nothing more addictive than that. So that wouldn't be a good idea.
Scrolling, like.
Yeah. So one of the studies I came across was from Torque, a supply company, but they had found that the employees in their study who took lunch breaks just to take a lunch break, not to work through lunch, were way more productive and effective than the team members who worked through lunch. So I would recommend just go to lunch. And if you have another coworker who's in the studio, like go to lunch together and just talk. That is a valid break. But yeah, the lunch, great. Adding the phone, there's some danger there.
Okay. All right. So then it's just about, well, after you have that break, how do we then calibrate the plan from then on for the rest of the day?
Yeah. I mean, so we still kind of go off the idea that about 8 hours, an 8-hour workday is, we don't want to go longer than that for sure.
Okay.
So if you look at the 3.3 rule you're actually working 6 hours and 2 of the 8 hours should be proper break time. So I think of it as kind of just a halftime, right? Like, especially if I'm a Zen master has a true halftime, right? I work 3 hours, I take an hour off, work another 3 hours, I go home, and basically my day was 7 hours. But studies show most people only actually work 2 hours and 53 minutes a day of productivity. And so
I've read that. That's insane, isn't it?
So this doubles that, because I can go in, and here's the thing psychologically that works really well with this too. As the owner, you're giving your team permission to take a break. Now, all of a sudden, they are more focused during the work time because they know that when they have a break time, they don't need to feel guilty if the boss or their supervisor walks by and is like, dude, what are you doing?
And it's also like Parkinson's law as well, right? You got less time to do the stuff. So you'll just do the essentials, you do the important stuff. So it's like a double whammy in that sense.
Yeah. And because think about it, you come in, it's like, I have an 8-hour workday today. Cool. Ugh, 8 hours. I can't go
And
there's
I
no
only
way.
get, well, what is it? I don't know. In the UK, I'm in Ireland, obviously, but in the UK, it's like 30-minute lunch break and 15 minutes in the morning and afternoon. Is that the same in the US? What's the
Yeah,
rules around lunch
similar,
breaks?
or
Yeah.
like in our case, we just don't have strict policies. It's like, take your
Okay.
lunch break when you want to take your lunch break, take a break
Yeah.
when you need a break. But
Yeah.
yeah, like when I worked at a call center when I was in college, they were very like, this is when you clock out for your break. This is when you clock like your 15-minute break and then do your lunch break. Like some companies are super rigid about when they can take it, which again doesn't really work because all of us are different,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah. So how do you manage that inside your accountancy firm? Is it just how you said there, you make it really open and liberal, or how do you, because it sounds like if I assumed that your staff would have an 8-hour day, but they would have those 2 hours and they would have 1 hour for lunch and then they'd leave early.
Exactly. They could,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it kind of depends on the department. Our admin team is structured in a way where a lot of them are assigned blocks of activities to do. And so we let them know you're scheduled for this 3-hour block, and then you're scheduled for this 3-hour block. It's up to you. It's really a 4-hour block. It's up to you on when you divide that hour of break time. Like if you feel like after an hour you need 20 minutes off, then go take 20 minutes off after an hour. If you're rocking and rolling and feeling great and you go the full 3 hours, and just make sure you take an hour. In this case, it'd be an hour lunch break. Like take it all at once. Leave the office if you want. Cool if you pair it with another friend in your department. It's like, hey, let's go take our break together. Because it also then helps build camaraderie and people want to stay when they're working with people they like to hang out with. But so that's kind of, it's like you have 2 4-hour blocks. Within each block, you should have taken about an hour break on based on what works for you.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So removed from what we're used to, isn't it? Certainly in the kind
Yeah,
of traditional work life.
and I can tell you, I struggled with it a little bit as an owner. I know some of my leadership
Mm.
team does too. It's like, well, and small business owners for sure, like, no, dude, you're telling me I need to pay
I got too
someone.
much to do.
I have too much to
Oh,
do.
sorry.
Yeah, but I have to pay someone 8 hours, but now you're saying you're giving them permission to only work 6. And I'm like, the studies show they're only working just under 3 hours right now anyways. So you're paying them for 8 hours and they're only giving you 3 hours worth of productivity. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You'll get 6 hours of productivity out of them and they're going to feel better about their lives because you've given them permission.
So this is, I'm just listening to you there, just had a fascinating insight that I think would be really useful. So in our space, a lot of our listeners will be training clients or have trainers that train clients in a small group or one-on-one fashion, in a back-to-back format, right? So, it's got me thinking. I remember talking to a mutual friend of ours who said that most of his trainers could do maybe 6 sessions back to back. Top end trainers, like 8 sessions, right? So that's 4 hours. It was 8 sessions. And I've done that, and that is tiring, right? 6 sessions. So it's interesting. What he said in terms of most trainers could do like 6 back to back aligns perfectly with what you're saying about the 3-hour rule, which is quite fascinating. Yeah. So it's like, and we know that in our space, how much you are into the client and into the workout and the customer service is everything, right? And it's something that I think perhaps needs some attention and work for a lot of small businesses out there who are kind of neglecting that side of their fitness business. And it's frankly a lot of times why they're not growing, because they're not getting referrals, they're not able to retain clients. So being aware of this kind of limiting factor, this thing that actually, if we've got trainers who are doing beyond what they're capable of doing in one block, that's going to have a negative effect on the business, right? So it's
Absolutely.
so we need to understand, and maybe this is my question to you, what can our trainers do what is their maximum amount of time? And obviously that should really be, I guess, if you're hiring and you've got a process for hiring and you want to make sure that you hire people who can do, because of like the economics, who can do, let's say, 6 sessions back to back, you need to ascertain if they're a good fit for that from the outset, right? So not wanting to derail us too much, but if you're following like an EOS method for like hiring, and you're thinking of like, are you familiar with EOS?
Yep.
Sort of, yeah. So if you're
Yep.
looking at like GWC, like the C being the capacity, have they got the physical and emotional capacity to do 6 sessions back to back, right? For example. So you might qualify that from the outset, but that if you have that knowledge and you've got that person in place, then you also want to be mindful of not giving them, oh, here's 10 sessions back to back, go at it. Because actually those last 2 hours may be really low quality and actually cause you to lose clients, right? What do you feel? How do you feel about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple of things that come to mind. One thing I learned with working with all the gym owners that we do and studio owners that we do is there's a lot of different ways that coaches are paid. And so like if a coach is paid per class versus a salary or something like that, I would recommend actually paying them a little bit more for the class and giving them purposeful time in between each session. Because even 6 back-to-back sessions, I bet you provide a better service and increase your clients who want to refer to you if you give them work time to not work with their clients and just build a relationship. Like, hey, the class is over, but I know that I have a 15-minute break in between the session or a 20-minute break in between the session, and I'm being paid to create a relationship with these members because then they might be inclined to refer more people. I would when you said that, that's where my mind went with having that. And then I would actually, let's say I say 15 minutes after the class, interact, and then I want you to take a proper 15-minute break, right? So if that's 45 minutes, 15-minute break, you're about that's pretty close to 3.3 rule. But then again, in the 15-minute break, like give them that time and pay them for it because they will come back to the next session completely focused as opposed to, I got to go straight into this,
So let me understand this. So that's a bit confusing to me. So they've done an hour class and then they're doing 15 minutes after the
an hour class. Okay.
What example were you?
I was thinking a 30-minute class.
A 30-minute. Oh, I see. Then 15 minutes of kind of relating to clients after the class, which is still working, right?
Yeah.
And then 15 minutes of alone break time, lunch, go for a walk, whatever, right? And that's, okay. All right. So that's slightly, obviously, under the 30% recommendation, isn't it?
Well, so 45 and 15, you're close.
All right. It doesn't have to be perfect.
No, we're not going to be perfect. I tell people, when you're a kid and you're playing horseshoes or grenades, you just have to get the grenade close, right?
Interesting metaphor. Okay. Yeah. So, okay, interesting. So that's how you could apply it to a group setting, especially if you're a kind of introverted person. Like I find me personally, like I would get real drained from that engagement because I'm like all, just, I don't know, like I'm connecting with everyone. I would be delivering that group and then I'd be like trying to connect with everyone in a deep, meaningful way after the fact. And then I'd be like, well, I need to, restore and renew after that. So
exactly. Cause studio owners probably have coaches or even themselves who fit that what you just described. But up until right now, they've probably just been going back to back. And so, that second class, they're not getting the same attention the first class did just because you gave the first class so much of your energy, you need it reset. And so imagine how much more profitable and your business is going to be and how your growth can happen if you give equal high energy attention to every single class. So for example, for me, I have like my Mondays and Tuesdays are a lot of one-on-one meetings with my team. And one of my favorite team members, we meet at 3:00 in the afternoon. And I notice 100% every time, if I didn't give myself proper breaks to that 3:00 session, like I'm tired and I'm not giving him my best energy and focus. And when we need to make decisions together, they're not my best decisions because I didn't give myself a time to reset so that I could come in and give him the same attention I gave to my 9:00 one-on-one meeting. It's the same application for studio owners.
Yeah. Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. I guess my concern, just jumping back about what you said, I think that where I would have a slight issue is in terms of the example of the 45 minutes, 15 minutes of client relational time and a 50-minute break is the scheduling and economics of that in a business. Because I think that what works better in our industry is probably what I was mentioning earlier, where it's like you get someone, you hire someone in who's capable of doing 2 hours or 3 hours back to back and then have that break. I feel like the unit economics just the general economics would work out better. I could be wrong. I can't do the public math right now. I'm sort of thinking on my feet.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you could schedule it and set it up such that you do build in those breaks at those smaller, shorter intervals. And perhaps you have a thought on that, John, considering you've ran
Yeah,
your business and
you'd want to look at the numbers, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be profitable.
Yep.
At the same time, I think from a standpoint of scheduling a coach to work in that block, they're still working in a continuous block. You're just utilizing the science of the 3.3 rule and giving them a break as part of their continuous block.
Right. And someone could obviously be running another group whilst they're recovering, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah. Ideally, if you have enough coaches and clientele, I would so if I had 2, I would make them leapfrog. So
like alternate.
Bob does the first 30 minutes and then Susie does the second 30 minutes. And then Bob, who was interacting with the members after his class and then took a 15-minute break, he's now ready, while now Susie is interacting with her classes. So you could do it that way. And again, you might have coaches who are able to, I'm just thinking from a growth and referral standpoint. And when I was running our gym, like the members who referred were the ones who felt connected to the coaches. So there's value there, even though there's not necessarily a paying class happening right then.
Mm-hmm.
But for sure, all these things, because the 3.3 rule is a set of guidelines, one of the guidelines as part of the system is you obviously need to be profitable. So you want to make sure you understand what's your profitability per class, per member, all that type of stuff to make the right decision. Now, I would argue there is grounds to say I can charge more because now I know every class is for sure getting the highest energy and ability from the coach.
Makes you think just how prevalent this problem is. Obviously, it's prevalent in all business, but we're specifically talking about fitness businesses or small gyms right now. Like how many of those sessions are poor quality, not necessarily due to the trainer being a bad trainer or not being whatever great at building rapport with clients, but simply that the structure that they're in just doesn't really support that renewal that they need to actually perform at their best. So that's very fascinating and really good to know, actually. So I guess as we kind of near towards the end of our time together, John, do you want to share more on, I was just looking at the kind of the free rule outline. Have we kind of answered the question, like, or discussed choose your free rhythm, or is there more you want to say on that?
No, we've covered it. The rhythm is all about what works for you, however long you work. I mean, what would be really cool, which I didn't have the time nor the know-how, is to find someone who could design a timer where like it's a box, it's a cube, it sits, you set work time and then you flip it over and you say, I'm on my break time, and it automatically calculates and sets a timer. I'm like, that'd be so cool. But in my mind, that's effectively how we can operate. It's like, just work for whatever amount of time works for you and then take 30% of that off to reset.
Makes sense. Okay. I'm looking at a lot of the questions that I had prepped, and I feel like we've answered a lot of those just through our discussion. There was one of your questions you actually put to me, which I thought was quite interesting. I'll ask you. It's what is the one part of business that 98% of owners are failing on?
Taking breaks. Like, I get it.
So true.
We have shiny object syndrome, whether that's the new thing, because I think is going to help us grow, or I am just dealing fire to fire to fire. And that's what my day consists of. It is so easy to just get caught up moving to the next thing. And we don't realize that we didn't take a break, which means we don't realize that there's a chunk of time that we probably just zoned out mentally. Like, we get to the end of the day, it's like, what did I do today? Usually that's a good sign that you didn't take enough breaks. But yeah, they're failing on giving themselves permission to take breaks. I think I'm very anti-hustle, like that whole idea of the only way to be successful is to put in 20 hours of work a week. It just isn't accurate. And those few people in the world that we are using as the pedestal, well, this guy is super successful and he's open about how many hours he works. They're uniques of nature. They're like, we have to stop comparing it. It's like
A selection bias, right? Yeah.
like, Usain Bolt is the fastest guy. And, like, I'm not as fast as him. I guess I'm terrible. Like, why would you compare yourself to him? They won the gene lottery. Okay. Like, we have to, social media allows us to easily focus on these people who are just super unique, instead of realizing that the general population, 95% of us we just genetically don't have those skill sets. I don't know if, in your world or your audience have ever gotten into it seems like it's not a craze, but just more emphasis over last year, DNA testing, where you do the test and it comes back and it tells you based on your genes, these types of foods aren't good for you, blah, blah, blah. So I did one of those with the DNA company, and funny, 70% of my genes are suboptimal. Like the thing in your brain that tells you you're full doesn't work in mine, which makes sense.
Okay.
Based on all these types of things, right? And I think we're realizing that more people are fit in the category of like, we have more genes that kind of hurt us, and we need to start building life around that to have success versus killing ourselves trying to be what these 5% are so naturally. Like, just, you can naturally not be not be hustle culture and take breaks and all that stuff and find massive success.
This sounds not like something I would typically say on my podcast, but there is a liberation, if that's the right word, to be found in realizing that you are kind of average. I hate saying that because it's not exactly what I mean, but there's a great podcast on this by a philosopher, he's actually Swiss philosopher called Alain de Botton. And I'll link it in the show notes. He was on a podcast called High Performance, and this guy is just phenomenal. And he's just talking about, how to think about success and achievement and happiness, etc. Really closely relates to what we're talking about how, you're not, it's not healthy to be comparing yourself to all these people who have, maybe a genetic advantages or advantages that you just simply don't have. And when you look at your life through the right lens, you'll just be so much more content and fulfilled. So I will link that up, and I think you'll enjoy that, John, as well. So look, I think I already touched on, which I don't know whether you touched on this in the book, and I know you know this, but obviously, like, there is a few skills that go into making this work. I feel like if you follow the free rule, great, okay, I'm going to do whatever it is. I'm going to find out what my stretch of time that I can do effectively is, and obviously that will vary. And then I'm going to follow the 30% rule. That's all well and good, but you also still need to have skills like prioritization, being intentional of your time, working on the business, and doing the stuff that actually matters. We all know, as you were alluding to earlier, that many business owners, myself included, will spend way too much time fighting fires or doing very low ROI activities. So, I mentioned it earlier. That's why I love things like EOS, because they really help you to look at the bigger picture and decide on what are the priorities. And then that can help you decide on what are your kind of like monthly, weekly, daily priorities. You can then block those, you can create those time blocks and make them intentional, focused on work that is really important and high leverage, right? I assume that is not the focus of your book, and that's a separate, obviously there are many books on that type of stuff. But that's important too, right, in all of this?
Yeah, it actually is. So
okay,
just think of it as this way. The 3.3 rule, like a house, you have a foundation. The 3.3 rule is the foundation. And then what I call it the 3.3 system is the house that is only held up because of the 3.3 rule. So it's kind of like, look, I wanted to give something that if the readers did nothing other than see the title and look at the quick definition of what the rule is, that their life would be changed for the positive. And that 100%. Is something that we can all easily do right now. I work this amount of time, I'll take 30% of it off as a break. We can all do that today. But then it's like, okay, when you are working, how do you make that time even more productive? And that's where the 3.3 system comes into play. it is a structure. I don't know if I mean, EOS to me has been out there for such a long time. I would never claim to say like this is like better than EOS or something, but it's what's worked for me in my business. I mean, because I was a one man shop, a 100 square foot office with no windows, and now we have 130 team members, and like
Wow.
we're 10. Anyways, we lots of success here. But yeah, it's how do we make sure that then now the time that my team is working or myself is working, it is the most effective possible. So things as simple like, are you grading your clients on your team members? If you have team members, are you even hiring them the right way? Are they the right people? How do you know if they're the right people? Are you making the right decisions to balance profitability with taking care of your team? Like, yeah, so there's all those things that'll go into it. That's part of the book as well.
Yeah. Can you give us a snapshot of your day and how you utilize this? You've obviously touched on it a bit about how you like to nap on the floor. Do you actually just nap on that floor right there, or do you actually nap
Right
on the
here.
bed?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You lie on the actual floor.
I lie on the actual floor.
This is supposed to be quite good for posture. Is it lying on a hard floor? I've heard.
No, I don't have great posture, so maybe it minimizes my sitting at my desk all day. So first thing I do well, not first thing, but the first activity I do after waking up is exercise. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, strength training. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I do cardio.
Cool.
And then from there, I then have I take a break after that. Basically, I shower and I get ready to come into work. And then each day is a little bit different, but if I have a lot of meetings in a day, I'm more of a sprinter because I am introverted and I want to give people my best attention when I'm meeting with them, but it does take a lot of energy. But if the other day I'm working on actual projects or things, I'll have fewer, but just a longer time. And because I've been living this, but I also have bad habits. So I'm still trying to work through lunch. Did a lot better over the last year, but there's still things that I'm not perfect at. But yeah, there's definitely breaks built based on how the day goes. I'll take time, usually the night before, to look at my schedule and make sure I have proper breaks.
Cool. All right. Interesting. Yeah, no, I'm excited to actually apply this myself. One last question before we wrap up, John. Sorry if there was a little bit of a glitch there. I think we had a little bit of connectivity issue there for a moment. So for myself, right, as I said, I'm probably best at kind of like, blocking out 2 hours for like high impact knowledge work, call it, working on the business stuff. Sort of in the morning, right? Before I need to like just unplug for a second. And what I normally do is I'll say do 2 to 3 hours, then I'll actually do 90 minutes. And in that 90 minutes, I'll typically do exercise of some kind. It could be strength training, it could be walking the dog, could be actually going for a run, whatever. Lunch, shower in that time. And then the next block will be something probably work orientated, right? Is that okay? Is that a good method for doing this?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It reminds me
too much break.
One of the guys, one of the guys I introduced this to, he, I don't know, it was probably like 4 or 5 months later. He's like, "Hey, I wanted to thank you. I've lost 20 pounds. I'm like, "You weren't a member of my gym. What's going on here?"
Yeah.
Like, he explained to me, he said, after you explained the 3.3 rule to me, one, I felt less guilty about actually taking time instead of, oh my gosh, I have work to do. There's so much work to do. Like, we can argue as business owners, our work never ends. So we have to be comfortable with that. But anyways, he's like, yeah, so I'll work in the morning. And now, because I have a full hour that I can take for my lunch break, I go and walk my dog for 2 miles. Before, like, I would walk the dog for like 5 seconds, enough for them to go to the bathroom and come back in. He's like, so because I walk 2 miles a day now and I can come back, and not to mention my afternoon is more focused. I don't have those afternoon lulls where my energy really dips and I need to take time.
Because and you think that also makes more snacking as well, because they're feeling like low, so they need a snack to like get some dopamine.
So he's eating less. He got exercise in. He's like, I've lost 20 pounds because I'm like, well,
fascinating.
I didn't intend for it to be, a weight loss method, but that's awesome. So It sounds like you already do stuff like that in your afternoon to kind of get the
Yeah.
physical component. That's great.
And not always to that exact, and I'm not perfect by any means. But it's really interesting because everything I feel we've discussed today aligns. It's very affirming because it's sort of like connecting the dots a lot for me in terms of science I've read or experts I've heard on podcasts talking about this type of stuff. It's all kind of converging. So I think this is so valuable, and I really hope the listeners take this to heart. John, I hopefully we can do a part 2 because I think there's more from the book. I'm looking forward to obviously reading it myself that we can cover in the future. Just remind the listeners, where can they go to find out more about you and also pre-order the book as well?
So to pre-order the book, Amazon, and if you just type The 3.3 Rule by John Briggs, it should pull up. The book itself, website for the book is 33rulebook.com. And then to find more about me, you probably still would go to our Insight Tax page, which is insightstax.com.
And let me know if this is still the case, John, but you guys have a lot of experience working with small gym owners, small fitness business owners in your tax firm. And I know that some of my listeners have contacted you, and I think some of them have done some business with you. So that's something that you're still focused on, that niche in terms of the small fitness business owner? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So if you're listening to this or watching this and you've got accountancy needs, then John's your man. Because he's actually ran one of those businesses before, and you've worked with tons of clients in that space. So that's awesome. And obviously, if they want to learn more about your expertise in that, they can listen to the other stuff we've done in the past, and we'll link it all up on the show notes. John, great to see you. Really appreciate you reaching out. I'm really happy to help promote the book, and I love what you sort of value you bring to my audience. And for everyone listening, to get the show notes for this episode, please go to highintensitybusiness.com. Search episode 452. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. This episode is brought to you by Imagine Strength, your go-to for safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. Growing a successful high-intensity training business requires workout equipment that's not only high quality, but also intelligently designed to fit the unique needs of your studio. And that's where Imagine Strength comes in. Drawing on the wisdom of the legendary Arthur Jones, Imagine Strength has crafted a groundbreaking line of fitness equipment that's as affordable as it is efficient, giving your studio the upgrade it needs without breaking the bank. The team at Imagine Strength breathes HIIT. Their passion for high-intensity training shines through in their designs, which they've consistently refined and innovated for optimum effectiveness and user experience. From my personal experience at Rec, I can attest to the careful consideration and craftsmanship that goes into every single piece. My Imagine Strength workout was absolutely brutal, in a good way, of course. Now, what makes Imagine Strength truly stand out? They have innovative equipment tailored for the unique needs of HIIT studios, affordable and efficient designs, lowering the barriers to entry for a HIIT business, continuous innovation and refinement ensuring your studio stays ahead of the curve. Founder Jeff Turner and his team are dedicated to moving the HIIT industry forward and making strength training accessible to more people than ever before. Here's how you get started. Number 1, visit imaginestrength.com. Number 2, discuss your specific needs with the team. And number 3, select the equipment that will propel your business to the next level. Head to imaginestrength.com today and give your HIIT business the Imagine Strength edge. Be part of the HIIT revolution and see firsthand how their unique equipment can transform your studio's workout experience. Elevate your HIIT business with Imagine Strength.
Let's go.